going
Okay.
on? Yep. All right.
All right. Stand by. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Good evening and welcome to the February 12th, 2025 meeting of this middle school building committee. This meeting is being held in person and remotely pursuant to mass regulations on open meetings. We will start with calendar update.
Yeah.
There's, first off, we do not see anybody in the attendance. Is there anybody on phone that has any public comments? Anybody? All right. Is everybody on the phone part of your team?
Probably. Let's see.
Brian is.
Greg?
Ryan and
Brian.
Nicole Forey's principal is
Yep.
there. Carissa.
Who's Greg Link?
oh,
Hi,
Greg.
I'm part of the Sustainability Committee, just joining in the public.
Okay, Greg, no problem. Just seeing who's out there and if you have any questions. Thanks. And thanks for being here.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
All right. I think we're all good then.
Minutes.
Minutes. There should be, let me check your packet, see if there's some minutes to approve.
Hey, Josh.
Sorry, later on. No problem.
And just for roll call purposes, Josh is here, Chris is here, David's here, Armin's here, Marty's here from a voting perspective. And then Carissa and Julie, I see you online, is that correct?
Yep. Yeah.
Awesome.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes from the Wednesday, December 11th, 2024 meeting of the Middle School Building Committee.
There's a
I just had
motion.
one
Is
comment.
there?
I wasn't here, so.
It's fine, just wanted to vote abstain.
No, I'm listed as present on the minutes.
Oh, we'll have to.
Oh,
Okay,
sorry. As amended?
as amended.
Thank you. As amended, is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Second.
All right, move to a vote. Marty?
Yes.
Josh?
Yes.
Chris?
Abstain.
David?
Yes.
Julie?
Yes. Sorry.
No problem. Chris? I mean, not Chris. Carissa?
Yes.
This one's going great tonight. And Armand is yes, whether we are unanimous. So now to the calendar?
Yes, we can go through schedule.
All right.
So for the folks that are here, I did hand out a schedule that's in the packet there. And then Marty, it should be in the presentation, one of the first slides.
Where'd that go? Sorry about that. Give me 1 second.
All right, now we're on board. There we go.
So as Marty's pulling up the schedule, so as everyone knows, we're in the schematic design phase of the project where we're moving along with the design details, still gathering information from the district. And the next milestone on our schedule here is for the SD cost estimates. And that is where we will develop our project scope and budget. And that's the number that we will bring to the town vote. That's the budget number that we will proceed with. So that is going to start happening March 3rd. And we have through the 21st by the time we do the estimate, and then we do two estimates. So JWA is using PM&C, and we are using AM Fogarty, they're both cost estimators, that's all they do. So do the cost estimates based off the SD drawings. And then what we'll do is we'll all come together, the two estimators, and then the districts invited will be there to walk through to make sure that the scope is accurate on both ends. And then we're looking at quantities and pricing and all those types of things to come up with a reconciled estimate at the end. So it's a pretty big milestone for the project. But that is going to be our next milestone, and that's why JWA is working so hard to get all these information and get all the meetings that they've been doing and try and get them going so they can get this estimate together so we can work with the estimators to get this number together.
What do you typically see in terms of the difference in the estimates? Are they usually within, just percentage points of each other, or?
In the beginning, they're pretty far, not
Yeah.
very far apart,
Yeah.
but what we do in that reconciliation meeting is we close that gap so that we all are in agreement, and then we take an average between the two. But to tell you a percentage, it differs on
Project to project.
on
yeah.
project to project.
And Colliers, as our project manager, is ultimately responsible for that reconciliation.
Yeah, so
Yes.
we'll run the reconciliation meeting. We have Tao, you may not remember, but she was in our interview way back when. She does all like the MSBA accounting. She's worked with Chad on the ProPay system, those types of things, but she'll be there she's in the background doing all the numbers in the back as we're kind of walking through it. The two estimators, again, are going back and forth on quantities and price per square foot, those types of things, what they're seeing in real time.
The importance of this estimate is this is what goes to the MSBA for the project scope and budget agreement.
Right.
So it does lock in their budget with what's eligible, ineligible, and what the grant will be. So it's important that we take the time necessary to do this and get it as accurate as possible.
So that's basically where we are in the schedule right now. If there's any questions on schedule?
The only question I have about schedule is, I got a call the other day, and I was just making sure we're all on the same page, that there's different like in dates flying around there. So I would just, from a in date perspective,
As far as a building completion?
well, no, when we're going for the vote.
Oh, yes.
So
I
in the
think it's-
past 3 days, I've had 3 different people tell me September, October, and November, and I said all are possible.
Right,
but
and
we
I think
haven't
what we've been trying to
landed
say
on
is
one yet.
the fall of
Yeah,
2025.
okay.
So,
Yeah, sorry, Josh.
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit. We're going to talk about it more at our March 10th meeting
Okay.
with the select board, and Ian can, I can't remember what Lynn told me not to talk about or what to talk about. So we've been going back and forth, because I think I had some questions on what, if there needed to be one vote first, and because we have to vote on the approval of the bonding, and we have to vote on the override, and those are different things. And maybe Ian will know better than me, but we ran it by town council to figure out if one needed to be first, and I think the answer is no. And so we're gonna strategize a bit, the select board, on which should be first,
Okay.
and the timing on that. But we do have, there's some weird things on, because it has to be a special election, and we need to game out when we need to have the special town meeting as well. Because if we wait until the special town meeting that we always have, it'll be too late.
Right. Okay. No, that's fine. Like I said, I think it wasn't from you, by the way. I'm not like.
Well, I don't know the answer either. so-
Yeah. So I'm just saying, like, I had a few phone call and people stopping me at Big One, like, hey, I heard September. I'm like, I can't really say yes or no.
still
So
a work in progress as far as.
we have a meeting Wednesday night. It's televised. Tune in.
Yep.
So I think we said at a meeting, a select board meeting, it'll probably be September.
Okay.
So that's probably where that came from, but that kind of prompted further soul searching on our part, so.
Okay. That's awesome to know. Yeah, I know for the last time when we did the town meeting vote first, and then we had the ballot vote. But if whatever it is, I mean, yes.
Because you have to have both of them, so
Right.
it's a matter of which one do you think.
And with electronic voting now, there's no like raising your hand. It's like see who's voting anyway. So I mean, it shouldn't really matter. All right. Sorry.
No, that's okay. I was done with it. So if there's any questions on schedule besides that?
Nope.
Okay.
Moving on. What CMR scoring is next?
Yeah, so we have, so there's two objectives here. One is to establish a selection committee for the CM at risk process. So that's to select a construction manager. So the process is very similar to how you guys selected an OPM and then the selection of a designer. It's a very similar process. You create a subcommittee and that's consistent of one person from the design team, one person from the OPM, and at least 2 from the district.
So I would like 3 from the district if possible.
Yeah,
I would-
it has to be only at
Minimum.
least. I mean, you can have as many as, you know.
I would suggest Chris, David, and Marty, unless anybody has objections. Can I have a motion?
I'll move we appoint,
Unless somebody else wants to serve as well, and we could have more, but nobody's jumping at it, so I would assume I would entertain a motion.
I'll move we appoint Marty O'Shea, Chris Latadre, and Dave McGrain to be the, what is it?
So they'll be part of the
Selection
CM
committee.
selection committee on the district's
The
behalf.
Construction Manager Selection Committee for the district.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion, there's a second. This calls for a roll call. Marty?
Who's gonna do it?
Yes.
Mr. Levine?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Carissa?
Yes.
Julie?
Yes.
Armin, yes. Unanimous. I didn't miss anybody, right? No. Good. All right.
Question on that is does the selection committee bring back a recommendation to the building committee, or is that a sort of,
Typically, yes.
Binding
You'd
to-
bring it,
Okay.
you'd make your recommendation back to the building committee, and they'd approve that recommendation.
Yeah, so it'll be the same thing. We'll have a scoring sheet,
Yeah.
and we'll go through the scoring sheet as a large group, as a full committee, and then you base your recommendations off of your findings.
Cool. Do we know who will be from you guys yet? Would it be you?
Probably, it'll be me.
Okay.
Yep, yep.
JWA? What do you guys?
We have to arm wrestle.
Roll dice for this.
Who do you think will win?
In arm wrestling? Dory, there's no doubt.
So the next piece is,
I had
no,
a
go
quick
ahead.
question on that. And don't ask me why I'm concerned about this, but you had a note on the bottom about being challenged, this determination. So it's not necessarily the cheapest, the lowest, it's who we think will be best, because they are bound by the price?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, so what you do is you'll go through the RFQ, which is qualification process, and then they're gonna submit their proposals, and then we have interviews and all that. So the qualifications is gonna be who you wanna shortlist. So if we got 5 or 6, we'll shortlist them down to, say, 3, and then they're gonna submit proposals. And it's not based off those proposals, it's based off of qualifications, and, but you can look at everything as a whole.
Okay.
rough timeline or time frame for the work for Chris, Dave, and I? When will this happen?
So I put together, if we want to start, I just put together, if we wanted to start, a couple weeks from now, it would bring us out till April, essentially, and so what I have in the RFQ is that we're gonna go through the process, but we're not gonna actually issue a notice to proceed until we actually get approval for the project, obviously.
So does Chad have to advertise this for us?
Yeah, so I'll have to work with Chad, we'll have to
Okay.
advertise it. So essentially, it's, we'll advertise it, the following week it'll release. And then, it's a couple weeks until the RFQs are due. And then that's when we take those couple weeks, or a week probably, to go through the qualifications, looking at them. And then from there, we'll schedule interviews. So I put some rough dates together that I can share with Chad afterwards.
Okay.
If we want to start soon, or we could also wait, another couple weeks. We're not in a huge rush to do it, but I would like to have the whole process done by the time, well before we actually go to vote.
Well, there's only 3 of you, so you guys can communicate together via email without breaking
Yeah.
open meeting law. I'm fine
Right.
with that.
The only precursor to that is it's in the Inspector General's office right now for approval,
Yes.
which is, he has up to 90 days to act on that, and he's had it for 2 weeks, so.
Okay.
It's typically not an issue, but it's
Right.
just a.
But we still want to go through you don't want to wait, you're allowed to start this whole process,
We'd rather have the construction manager,
ready to
here,
go.
like,
Once we
ready
get,
to-
yeah, because we'll
yeah.
have the Inspector General's okay, and then we'll have the town vote. We just want to make sure we have them already lined up, so as soon as we get that, we're like, here you go, and we get started with them.
The only other question I think, and I don't know if we talked about this before, is can they join the project earlier? Like if we know who it is and we select them, maybe not getting paid, but would they attend meetings and get more knowledgeable?
So
about
we would
it?
have to have a conversation with them if that's going to be something that we want to do.
Okay.
we wouldn't, so if you bring them in early, what the benefit is sometimes is if they do the estimate, but there's not enough time to do all that, to bring
Okay.
somebody in and then have them do the estimate piece of it. But if you wanted somebody there, you know, a month before town vote, we could always, you know, talk and say, hey, you know, we could, you know, talk with them and see if they're willing to do that on a good faith effort or however
Okay.
we want to break it out.
All right, thanks.
Yep. And that page there, Marty, just, so we do want to just, I don't know if anyone's gone through the RFQ. I know it's a long document, but essentially, these are the main points that we're looking at, that we're going to be doing qualifications on. Scroll down just a little bit. So it's based off of points that we're doing, and so we have prior similar project experience, quality of references and relevant projects, the management team and organization of for the project, quality of their executive summary, if they have a litigation or performance history, financial status, their safety record, sustainable construction experience. So those are all based off of points, and, you know, prior similar project experience has the most points. So we're going to be looking through all those, doing reference checks, because we want to make sure that we're bringing somebody on who's, you know, who does CM work, who's worked with the MSBA, who does school work. They've done middle schools in the past. We're going to be looking at all that and then checking the references and see how they performed. But this is one of the pages that's in there. This is kind of what we're looking at in a summary of their qualifications. And so, Marty, for what I put in here is the qualifications are going to be mailed to you.
Okay.
Or to your office, and then I put for my name, but they'll come here, so that way everything comes to one spot.
Yep.
And then somebody could just check them in, because they'll have to be in by a certain day and time.
Okay.
So as long as somebody can stamp them once they come in,
Yeah,
that'll work.
perfect. Got it.
Am I missing anything?
Yeah.
No? Okay. So that'll be the RFQ.
Any questions, comments? All right. Dory, design update? Christian, who's doing it? Dory?
I think we're
You guys
starting
got
with,
tag
Arm
team it?
wrestle again?
Nice.
I think we're starting with me on talking about the plan revision. So it's actually been a while since this group has seen the plans. We handed hard copies out to you. We've been meeting every 2 weeks with the district leadership team, educational team, to review the plans and revise. A lot of great input. It's been a really wonderful district to work with tremendous amount of focus on educational experience and coordination of what will be the ultimate experience for students and teachers in the school. To give you again the overview of where we are, we had decided this general concept was already here, that we would have these different parts stretching from the south to the north, different forms that help to bring the scale of the building down and be sure we get good daylighting into the academic experiences. So where we have landed is at the 6th grade, starting on the first plan, which is a...
So, Dory, just real quick, just as a perspective, on the bottom of the screen
Yeah.
is William Street, essentially.
Yes,
So people looking at it, kind
page
of
down to
orientation.
south, yeah. North is up, that's easy, we like it that way, but it makes it very awkward to put on a piece of paper that you're looking at horizontally. So it works best if you spin it. So the first block of rooms is the 6th grade wing. So you have 2 teams. The school is breaking your 665 students into 2 teams per grade. So 6th grade has a team A, team B. And it's organized in such a way that they have 4 core classrooms for each team. And then the science classrooms we've now decided to place at the end of that bar, so that that is all one contiguous neighborhood. We're not showing furniture here, but the reason you have that more generous corridor area, so that there's a common space that those students can interact and actually use as sort of breakout space from the classroom. Also planned south is the admin wing and entry, and the main entrance is right here at the very bottom of the page. That would be, you'll see, we'll get to site plans, but that's essentially facing the visitor parking area and the bus drop-off loop. So most visitors will be coming in that way, but there is a secondary door to the east, which is right above admin, and that's the entry point for students being dropped off on the parent drop-off loop. So the primary secured entrance that visitors have to buzz in through is to the south. So the office will be looking that way. So now you can see the office configuration. You have a suite of offices in the admin wing. Sequentially, as you move through the building, you are moving through that secure vestibule into the building, and then you're into a main entry area where the main stairwell is that takes you up and down between the two floors. Since we saw you last, we've added a second stair. If you go past the next block, you'll see another stairwell. So the reason for that is partly code-driven to be sure that we have no dead-end corridors, we have adequate egress out from the second floor. But how it will work is that allows for students to flow up to the second floor from two directions. So it actually kind of helps and keeps students from having to navigate away and then back towards the cafeteria when they're going up and down. So that second block is the 8th grade block A. And the 2 link classrooms, and then the media center in the middle.
Hey, Dory, can I just have a question about
Sure.
the entranceway?
Mhm.
So it looks like there's a door from the outside and a little vestibule.
Yes,
Then there's like another like holding chamber.
yes.
Okay. No, I'm just making sure I
Right,
understand that.
exactly.
Okay, no,
So the
I
first
love
one
it.
is-
I mean, it's
It's
good.
what you're
Okay.
imagining. So the first one is really just an airlock, essentially. It's literally weather-based, and anybody can come in there. You can come into that second vestibule where you'll be seen by the office staff, and once the school is open, that third set of doors you can't get past.
So the office staff, will they be able to see outside as well?
Yes, so they'll see
Okay.
out and they'll see into that vestibule.
That's awesome. Okay, great.
And then you'll ask for permission to come in, you'll have to come in, sign in, and then be released through. So
Okay.
that's the more secure method. There are different ways of doing it, but that's
No,
what we're
yeah.
trying to show it.
I know why we did what we did with the high school, but it's like,
Things
that
have
it's so
changed
far
a little
away,
bit.
it's a little
It's a
inconvenient.
little too far.
Yeah.
This is closer, but it's also nice that it's not
Got it. Right.
right against the window.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that.
That's okay, yeah, important. We also have actually an assistant principal at the other end of that block who actually has eyes on the other area, which is gonna have a lot of student movement past. You see that AP office there. The nurses suite is in that admin block as well, but near that exit so that there's an easy way in and out and have their own suite essentially, but can connect into the admin suite. The media center, you'll see the plans at our next meeting, but just generally, it's kind of in the heart of the school, and it's by design in this school, kind of intentionally close to the STEM program and sort of central to everything at the first floor, so that staff member's active with a lot of different classes, and there's a lot of different things happening in the media center. There's both stacks as well as a digital lab that is kind of the primary kind of computer lab that can support all different classes. So there's a lot happening in the media center that you'll see. Then you get into the STEM wing, which is an open classroom, and then 2 engineering classrooms. And those engineering classrooms are connected to each other and to the outdoors. And they have a plaza outside that you'll see, and they have some additional support spaces around them. And we have a kind of an area in front of that which will allow that to sort of spill out. We wanted those classrooms to be intentionally kind of on display. They have a lot of really active learning going on. And they are closely connected to the art classrooms. The art classrooms wanted to be in this area and near the loading dock because they actually bring a lot of materials in and out, and they have a nice courtyard near them that they can access. We met, we'll be revising these plans further, but in terms of some of the minor details, but generally these configurations are working. We're in the midst of revising our kitchen plan, so the details aren't there, but the intent is you would flow into the cafeteria to the left, and there'll be a servery sort of spilling out from the kitchen into the cafeteria area. We're trying to work to create a bit more of a scrambled type eating area that gives students more choice. The idea being that if they have more choice and more options, then they tend to eat what they want, and then they tend to actually eat it. It's a really good thing. The cafeteria, even though you see that yellow circulation path, that's sort of open all the way through. And at the district's request, we've created a slightly smaller space, part of the cafeteria that is a little bit quieter for students who want to not be in the tumult of the main cafeteria space. So we'll have a variety of seating, but also a slightly distinct space, and it'll be open to the cafeteria. It's not an enclosed space, but it'll feel a little quieter with a lower ceiling. We have our auditorium sized similar to the Glenbrook Glenbrook Auditorium, yeah, 400. I always forget which one's the big one. So that's kind of coming along. We've tried to design this in a way that doesn't have extremely expensive catwalk. It's not a high school auditorium, but it does have, the full seating, 2 decks of seating, sloped towards the stage, and the full 1,600 square foot stage. Then you have band, music, and chorus, which connect to the auditorium through the band room, so that there's a kind of a back door in. And you have your health and PE wing, 2 health classrooms, support spaces, an alt PE room, and a gymnasium, which we've brought down a little bit in size from where we spoke. It still meets our court sizes, and it'll have some built-in bleachers, but because it's not, we found without needing full high school size bleachers, we could bring it down a little bit in size. Moving to the second floor.
Can I ask questions about
Sure.
this first?
Yeah.
This is what I learned from Chris early on.
Yeah.
Less angles and jags and everything is less money, right? Is that what?
Every corner costs money. Yeah.
Right. So, like the STEM rooms, why aren't they just extended out to eliminate corners, or the next one too?
You'll see when we look at the elevations and the massing, part of it is about the different roof locations and we're in a residential location. So remember, we didn't want to make a giant rectangle and just extrude up.
Okay.
For a couple of reasons. One is it would really overwhelm the neighborhood. The other is that you're actually trying to get light into certain spaces. At that particular moment, what we have actually is we've combined the gym, the band, the auditorium, all of that into what's pretty much one large mass. And then we're just separating it, and then we have another structural system for the next mass and separating it, and another for the next mass. And those separations between the 3 masses allow us to get light into our classroom spaces from the north and the south, and then allows us to pretty efficiently put a lot of the rest where we don't have those needs together into one large efficient mass.
Okay.
So,
And if anybody
you'll
else has
see some
questions
of the-
along the way,
Some of the
feel free.
undulations are helpful when we're working on it exterior.
Ian.
Just real quick, thinking about the band versus music, do you mind just clarifying the difference? Is that just to store instruments, or?
There's 3 totally different teaching spaces. Chorus and music is just a standard all sorts of music program. Chorus is specifically chorus. Band is band and orchestra, so it's a large instrument, and that seats typically about 50 students, and large instruments within the room. And then they will also be able to, because you have two instructors using that large instrument room, band and orchestra, there's also a small office that allows them to connect.
So we're trying to support chorus, band, strings, and general music in that space. So,
Good question.
Any other questions on the first floor? Okay. On the second floor, starting. Oh, sorry.
Another question. I know we're talking about bathrooms later. Is there like a gender-neutral bathroom? So I said boys and girls there. Is there like a separate space?
So when you look at, that area, we have a need for a lot of fixtures because we're near the auditorium and the gymnasium. So we did go through an extensive review of bathroom options and approaches with the district. We're actually going to kind of show you the end result here in this plan. But wherever you see those, what are called gang bathrooms, you'll also see another non-gendered unisex bathroom associated with it.
Oh, okay.
So that's evident there, but it's also evident in every wing. If you look at the what we call A wing in the south
Yeah, I
and
saw
B
that. I
wing.
was wondering if that's what that was.
Yeah,
Okay.
same thing. You see, the decision was to have a male side, a female side, and a unisex bathroom all together so that it's in proximity
Great,
to each other.
thank you.
We've reviewed, different ways of configuring that. So this was showing different options on the sink configuration, but we've also settled that decision. second floor. Immediately over sixth grade is seventh grade. So the more consistent we make our walls and our plans, the cheaper and easier to build. So we're pretty much straight idea. Specifically, which classroom is where we haven't necessarily, all these classrooms are the same size. So again, you have seventh grade Team A and Team B. Over the admin, you have intervention, academic intervention areas, so that's a literature lab, a lit lab, literacy lab, math lab, social emotional room, a staff break room, and the guidance suite. And we're gonna switch social emotional staff room. That was a discussion we had today. But that is kind of trying to be a bit quieter for students to pull into. We've organized the labs into a sequence of pretty efficient spaces. All of these have to meet MSBA guidelines very strictly. So we found this efficiency would really help, and that's again why we have that second set of stairs. Each lab has its own 200 square foot prep room for storage and preparation of materials to go into the lab. And then there's one chem room that they share that's a locked storage room for chemicals.
So to be clear, the 4 labs that you're seeing here are the 4 science rooms for 7th and 8th grade.
Right, yes, so
right.
2 per grade.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the 6th grade science rooms are attached to the teams on the first floor.
Right, and that 6th grade science you'll see is a 1-story building, or section of the building.
What about the guidance? Do we have, like, there's 4 there? 4, but,
So that would incorporate school adjustment counselors
all right,
and school counselors.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, thanks.
Yeah,
Yeah.
my language hasn't shifted over, but
Yeah.
more counselors than guidance these
Okay,
days too.
got it.
Yeah. There's an elevator in that A wing as well, serving the second floor. And then across from the 7th and 8th grade science lab is the B wing, which is the 8th grade second floor.
And the elevator will not be used for storage, Nick.
Yes. 8th grade, we decided to have them have that split, so there's a little bit more motion between them. They may be taking classes within upper and lower floor. So it sort of moves them a little bit towards that high school experience there, but they're also closer to the specials, so we hope that those transitions don't create any. It seemed like they were the more mature students who would be able to handle more transitions, so that was the intent there. And you see, just by virtue of the color, that the auditorium will have a control room as well. And it has to have a small lift to allow you to get to that control room so that we don't have a second stairwell back there and another elevator.
George, could I just underscore, like, one of the underlying ideas here is that we have teams at each grade level. So there's 2 100-student teams at 6th grade, 7th grade, and 8th grade. So kind of recognizing that as we create a larger middle school, we can still create that sort of small feel by creating the neighborhoods that are depicted in the plans here. So there's a cluster of rooms that will serve 100 student teams at each grade level. So,
And part of the point there is to be sure that there's a kind of a group of teachers working closely with a smaller group of students, to support them.
Dory, can you touch on, for anybody that might be wondering or watching, the integration of special education spaces throughout the building?
Yeah, so intentionally throughout the buildings, and you'll see that there are some classrooms that are sub-separate classrooms where students will be in that classroom for a fair amount of time, but they're still associated and near to a team. And then you also see some special education spaces within the team. So those are the resource rooms, also called learning centers in this district. Each team has one, which has a staff person in it. So that staff person is as closely tied to those inclusion classrooms as possible, so that they're supporting students through the inclusion model and able to do pull out into the resource room and support them directly. And then around there, you see small group rooms. So there's 2 in each, 2 in that A wing, plus you have the space kind of the common area, so that you have an enclosed space that students can also go into with a support staff for Title I assistance, you know. So you have a lot of different intervention mechanisms for students to really keep them within an inclusion model as much as possible, as well as having the unique spaces that you need for the link LD and behavioral classrooms that are you know, have dedicated staff supporting.
She is, yes.
One of the changes from the last time we met is the creation of two 400 square foot labs, the literacy lab and the math lab. So those staff, I believe they're 2 per each, are in there, as well as sometimes going to those small group rooms or going into classrooms. So they kind of move in and out, but they'll have their own base to do group work and have their materials and resources together.
The orange spaces here, maybe you said this story, I'm sorry. The orange spaces are the designated as special education spaces.
And I just want to acknowledge that Nicole is on the line. Shwanier, right? There she is.
Another important orange space is that
Yes, sorry, I'm here.
Thanks, Nicole.
there's that special education conference room at the first floor near admin that is there intentionally to support family meetings coming into the district to meet with district staff. So there's 2 conference rooms. One is kind of within admin, the other is going to be available probably for other reasons as well, but it's very heavily needed that there is a conference room to support those family conversations.
And I love the records right next to the room, so that's awesome.
Yeah.
Question, Tori.
Sure.
In the labs, I assume on the bottom, those are like wash stations. What are the squares with the X in them? What is that?
In the labs.
On the second floor.
Exterior wall door.
Yes, those are sink locations. So the way labs are designed, and you can see in that on screen, you see how you have.
These here?
Yeah, so these I assume are like sink spaces? and
Yes.
these-
Exactly.
What are those things?
Those are also.
Oh,
So
okay.
the way it works is those parallel tables that are up against that are on wheels, and they're either in the middle for teaching, and you're engaged with the teacher there, and then they are rolled over to and connected to the casework, and the casework is at the perimeter. So for every group of every group of 4 students, there's a sink.
Gotcha.
It's going to be interesting. Our most crowded spaces right now, at least at Williams, even at Glenbrook, are our science rooms. And so, you know, these are going to be so much more comfortable for science teachers, science students.
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
1,400 square foot
Yeah.
rooms.
Yeah, they're good size. Which is within the allowance of
Which
the
is the
MSBA.
required, yeah, they can't.
Required.
they-
Yeah.
It's like triple the Glenbrook one.
Yeah, they're needed.
So you'll see in our, next month, we'll show you some interior perspectives. We're developing those now. We tend to approach a lot of those decisions, material and color decisions, kind of from the outside in. So today, we're going to spend some time talking about the exterior. But before we get to that, we wanted to bring in our landscape team to talk about some site options. And you'll see we often present 2 ideas to give you some things to think about. And Brian from Haverson Sign Bond is going to share his inspiration and thinking behind the site plans. And really, this is conceptual at this stage, but important to the learning process.
Great. Well, hello, everyone. I'd like to start with precedent images, kind of inspirational pictures, so you get an idea of what some of these spaces feel like when we actually show you them in plan and in detail. So here's a slide on nature-based learning and general sustainability. Is something we like to include in all of our projects. So the first top row, let's see, starting at the left, just the idea of maybe having some areas that are more naturalized, no more grasses or sedge grasses, so they're less maintenance, but they're easier to maintain because you can tell that there's not weeds and things growing in them, which could be challenging from staff perspective. We like the idea of incorporating stormwater measures, rain gardens, things like that, bioswales. So it's an educational tool to teach students about, stormwater infiltration and mitigation, and they create habitat at the same time. But we can incorporate things like bridges, like you'll see here, or maybe steppers, like you see next to that in the top row, or things to kind of draw students into these spaces and encourage and offer different educational opportunities. The image on the right, on the lower level, is an amphitheater type outdoor classroom application that kind of terraces down into a wetland or into a rain garden application. So I love the idea of that, of kind of maybe terracing down and allowing the students to sort of get down and interact with some of these ecosystems. Looking closely at the images in the middle of the page on the bottom, these are just examples of other paving materials that could be implemented. So these are what we call epoxy resin aggregate paving. So it's loose aggregate that's bound by a resin, so it's not loose. So it looks a little bit like stone dust that you might be thinking of or more familiar with. But this is not loose and won't sort of stick to shoes and be brought into the school and things like that. It's kind of just has a nice texture to it. It remains permeable, so plaza spaces can support trees, as you see coming out of the paving on the right-hand side. The water infiltrates through to the root systems, but it's kind of just an interesting, more sustainable approach to some paving in our, softer landscaped areas. We can use local aggregates again, so this is kind of a carbon-friendly approach to paving and a concrete reduction opportunities as well. Finally, on the far left is just, it doesn't look like much, but it's an interesting thing that's happening these days. It's called a Miyawaki garden. It's an approach of planting small sapling type trees to create a naturalized wooded environment more than just planting individual trees. So it's an educational opportunity again. You can even get students involved. It's kind of a fun approach to planting and screening, which is something that we're looking to do behind the school. Next slide, please. Okay, so now we're going to show a few more presentations about ideas that are shown in the first option. So first of all, we love the idea of outdoor dining opportunities and seating opportunities with flexible furnishings. And a great way to make the space comfortable is place the furnishings under a tree canopy. We often we propose things like shade structures, and they're all great ideas, but ultimately in projects like this, more often than not, there's a value engineering component, and they're the first to go. So this is a great way to provide shade and offer interesting seating opportunities for students outside of the cafeteria. Just to the right of that is an example of some precast seat walls. Again, we're going to be showing you a couple ideas of introducing walls like this to for outdoor classroom uses and just general unique seating opportunities, something more permanent, fixed than what you're seeing in terms of the tables and chairs.
So, before we go on, can I just ask, what was the prioritization of the design, or the options? How did they come to fruition? Was input from the district put directly into it, and this was what we were saying the district wanted, and or is this more, this is what we're seeing out there now, and this is what we are advertising? And the only reason why I ask, because for me, number one is the ease of maintenance, because we built all the trees and the flowers and the bushes at the high school, and we had to whack them all down 4 years later because we couldn't take care of it. So I'm just wondering, was ease of maintenance at the top of the thought list on this?
Yeah, I want to just clarify in terms of the actual activity zones out there. What we're aiming for is coming out of the conversations. We've done 2 rounds of interviews with teachers, and we've met repeatedly with the district. So using the uses that are going to happen out there, so we know outside of the cafeteria we have an eating area, and we know students go out there, and we've talked to faculty about the fact that students go under trees and they sit at tables, and, you know, we want a mix.
That makes perfect sense to me.
So we know that like, we spoke about the STEM teachers going out to hardscape, so we have that goal. We know the art teachers want to go out and draw with students. We know that the special education teachers will take individual students on paths and like to circle the building. We know we need bike, storage facilities because of the number of bikes. So all of these, and we know we have approaches. So we've provided Brian with those criteria, and we've certainly talked about low maintenance. We've also, remember, gone through the sustainability requirements for the program. So it has to be LEED certified. Stormwater is a reality, so we have to have those features. So all of these things have kind of come together in our conversations, and this is, Brian's first pass of introducing.
No, that's fine. I just like making sure, like, because I look at Nick over there, and I'm like, the first thing I think about is,
It's a lot of stuff to take care of.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And this is also still schematic design, so.
No, I get it,
we're
and
more
you're-
than anything, we're trying to come up with a design strategy, that-
And your explanation was exactly what I needed to make sure, is that, like, everything we did ask is here, and the teachers is here,
Right.
and everything's here. Yes, yes,
Right.
yes. Thank you.
And even when with teachers, we create those maintenance concerns, so
Yeah, for me, it's about balancing outdoor access for kids and creating learning spaces and gathering spaces and play spaces, but balancing that with the reality that, maintenance needs to be a priority, the maintenance of these spaces, and low maintenance shrubs, low maintenance plantings, and even if we have mowable areas, we want to make sure we can get equipment to those areas and that kind of thing.
And then the other two factors I want to mention is, remember, in our early conversations in PSR, the need for screening, the concern about the neighborhood, the concern about canopy. So those are also there. And then the second thing I'd mention is, we've talked a little bit about it, and we can always go into it more, but the positive health aspect of having green space for students is really, and shade around what you're looking at.
No,
So
no,
those
and don't
things-
get me wrong, I'm not advocating that we don't have green space. I think as much green space as possible, that is low maintenance.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think Brian's going to address that as well.
Okay. And yes, we have to recognize that we do have neighbors right next to the site, and we know that's got to be part of the solution as well. Sorry, Brian.
Yeah, no problem, no problem. So yes, moving on the upper right-hand corner is just another example of some terracing, and again, if maintenance is a concern, we can always infill that with, wood decking or the aggregate paving, as we were mentioning, or some other materials, so that you don't have the lawn terraces, as we may have shown, if that's a preference. Just an idea. Let's see, moving down on the next level. Sure. Either side is fine. Lower left is, now we're looking at like a softer landscape, just simple trees and more of a wooded environment. There is one wing of the building that, after speaking with JWA, we want to have it be more passive and just kind of a nice area to look at, but without, introducing a lot of activity, because the classrooms look out at this space. So an easy way to do that is just sort of rolling landforms, very simple native plant palette that creates a ground cover, naturalized woodland floor almost, and some trees. So it can just, perennial plantings come and go, no maintenance, occasional maybe, I suppose, but limited, and limited access in those spaces. The other images are just potential, an example of an entrance to a building in angular nature, which this first option shows a little bit. And then the image on the right is outside of the art classroom, we'll show you, is a plaza space that, again, is encircled by buildings. And an idea we thought would be pretty fun is to provide students an opportunity to gather outside, but in a kind of unique manner, by providing sort of a sculptural table element that they could just come right outside into the plaza outside their door and host a classroom. And in a unique way to sort of encourage creativity, something different and kind of interesting to look out on. We'd probably not use fixed seats like you see there, but flexible furniture and so on. So, but the space in general can be more flexible. Next slide. Okay, so this is the overall site plan for the first option. Now, I'm going to focus first. We're going to hone in on the interior, the spaces on the next slide, but I just wanted to touch base quickly on the overall site plan, which is the same for both, aside from what happens directly outside of the building. So I think everyone's aware that we've talked about play fields. We're showing, high school size soccer, football, and now we've introduced U12 size soccer fields running perpendicular to the fields. And we're showing it a different color now because at some point, I believe tonight we might be having a conversation a little bit about the potential for synthetic turf. And we actually have a specialist from Pine Bond here who can answer some specific questions if you have any about that at some point. But we did meet with folks about netting needs, high netting. Those are the dashed lines around, behind goals and things like that. So this should accommodate all of the town's needs. Parking lots are pretty straightforward. We have some larger islands around the parking spots, again, with the desire to maybe introduce bioswales or rain gardens as a means of infiltrating some stormwater on site in an interesting manner. And then you can just get a general overview of the site here is, all of the green spaces, where the hardscape spaces are in relation to the gym and so on. But the next slide, if we want to go ahead and jump to that. Oh, actually, before you do, sorry, I'll make one comment here. The trees you see that are in sort of circles and light green are all existing trees to remain. I just want to be clear about what's proposed right now and what's existing. So within the site, it's almost all new trees, but around the perimeter, we do plan to supplement the existing sort of tree buffered edge, in particular for loading docks and things like that, with evergreen plantings, other tree plantings to really create that strong buffer around the site. Next slide. Okay, so now this is where the fun stuff comes into play. So we're looking behind the school now, which is west. So north is to the right. But for this conversation, this will be the west side of the school, the top of the plan. And I'll kind of focus a little bit on some of the spaces that we're proposing here. So you see the fire lane where it says option A goes along the property line of the school. So one of our goals would be to use landform along that edge to help create a sense of enclosure and screen that so that all of the uses in the space kind of between the classrooms and behind the building you see here are much more comfortable spaces to be within, and you don't feel that you're along, next to a loading dock or along a service drive. Those would be mounded, planted, like we mentioned, with no mow grasses or sedges or something very simple so they can just exist as a wooded environment, no maintenance ultimately in the future. This is where we can introduce tree planting, that Milwaukee garden I mentioned, to create a future forest and education opportunities, but basically adding a dense screening around that perimeter would be the goal. Internal to that, you can start to see some terracing. These are potential precast walls like we mentioned before, so they would frame and create outdoor classroom opportunities, which was requested, and in different forms. So the one on the left is kind of more circular. You can picture a classroom looking down at sort of a stage area, paved area. And all of these want to be more naturalist in this environment. So you can picture a science class or otherwise sort of looking down at the wetlands as they're oriented and, teaching opportunities outside, experiencing the landscape. Whereas the one adjacent to that, behind the second wing, we're thinking about this being a sloped walk that goes down to maybe a wood deck, a little closer to the wetlands. So again, this is that opportunity to interact directly with the rain gardens and habitat ultimately that will result from the stormwater being there. Meandering back between the second opening. So if you see between the second and third section of the building, exactly. This is where the art classrooms overlook that space. So this is where we're showing a plaza space that those art classrooms can spill out into, provide a couple trees in the paving as we showed for shade for the students. And then potentially adding that sculptural feature, table feature that is something very interesting to look out at, but then also can activate this space with the art classes. The other wing right now, again, we're showing something very passive and something more to look out at. So it's kind of a simple path that meanders back between those wings. and has a couple seating opportunities. So for those that maybe need a little more care or separation from students, this is a great opportunity to allow them to walk back into that space and just experience a more calm experience. Moving to the right is the cafeteria, where Dory has her cursor now. And we've been discussing a fun idea, and I don't know if Dory's mentioned this, but potentially some indoor-outdoor relationship. See a bunch of red dots that sort of filter out, so can the trunks of trees or sculptural elements sort of penetrate the building and then also extend out into the plaza space to really draw your view out into the space and connect those two experiences. We're seeing that space directly outside of that area as outdoor dining opportunity with tables and chairs, flexible furniture under the tree canopy. Again, providing shade and dappled light for experience for the students. Here we have, again, kind of a terraced seat feature. And this one we're showing sort of wood decking or some other material, so it's more hardscape material, because this will probably have more activity in this stone, be it gym or just general kind of recess gathering. Directly behind that seating, there's a dark line just pointing out the notion of a screen wall of some kind to separate the loading dock, which is just behind that. So there's dumpsters, loading, other kind of unsightly generators, things like that. So that we could put a decorative screen wall meandering between trees to help enclose this space and create that separation. To the right of that, a large area of asphalt. We do know that most schools appreciate the asphalt, so there can be basketball courts. We've got a half basketball court, a full basketball court, foursquare. Any other uses can happen here. Wall ball against the gym. It's intentionally opened, so any kind of activity, the structure itself can be used for play as well. The form you see sort of meandering through is just the idea of adding some paint or some interest there that could tie into the overall design scheme and carry it through and just make it a little more dynamic, interesting, and exciting for the kids. I think wrapping around the building, the entryway to what is what is north, plan left, kind of entry to the building, that location, so we could have sort of paving. That would be plan south, yeah, so that's the main entry to the building, so there's access to the parking there, and we're showing access from the parent drop-off zone, which is where the cursor is now, in that entry, as well as out towards the parking on William Street. And then there's a secondary entry as well, just to the right of the cursor, as well as a kind of gathering opportunity outside of both of these entrances. So you can imagine a place to pause, a place to sit before going in. So just the right of the cursor again is outdoor classroom space with a sort of steep wall framing that. So that's for the two uses there in the building. What else? Oh, you see those dark rectangles along the sidewalks in a couple of locations on this plan? I'll just note that we do have, that's a covered bike structure. Yeah, that's one of them. And adjacent to that is some exterior bike racks as well, and that's another covered bike rack. On site right now, we're showing 50 bike racks, 30 of which are covered, which would accommodate 100 bikes as of now. So that's a pretty substantial amount, but we do know that this is used frequently by bicyclists in the warmer seasons.
Brian, can you describe just the characteristic of the south and east side in terms of the vegetation itself? And, you know, the light green areas, are those just open lawn?
So we're assuming the light green areas are lawn. So if you can picture kids, being dropped off by the parents or picked up, and like to run around and play and do things. So there is some lawn. It's easily manicured and easy upkeep around the front of the building, because you want the building to look nice. Lawn is the easiest thing to maintain. You don't have to worry about what the planting is. There are a couple of plant beds that we're showing, but again, for other images we've shown you, we'd like the planting to be simple, low maintenance plant beds. Behind the building is where we were talking about, or kind of say behind the building, plan north, top of this page, is where we were thinking of adding looser, like a combination, I suppose, of lawn and looser plant materials. So that just the no-mow grasses, they'd only be maybe mowed once a year. If that, if we're creating a wooded environment or successional buffer there, separating the fire lane from the school, that would probably never have to be mowed. But internal to that, you might, move some things down once a year. It would be, and again, it's supposed to be a very naturalized landscape in the school there.
Brian,
Let me know if you'd like to ask questions about any of the options. Otherwise, we can just move to the next one.
Brian, the wood decking, I think I'd be concerned about the durability of that, and unless there's some materials that sort of we know stand the test of time.
If we introduce things like this, we tend to use tropical hardwoods. We won't use, Ipe is the strongest. It's also very expensive and not very sustainably harvested, but it's as durable as concrete. This will stand the test of time. It's one of the hardest woods out there. There are a couple other tropical hardwoods, Jatoba, Kumaru, others that are basically the same, but sustainably harvested, and these things will be here forever, ultimately. I wouldn't worry about kind of durability of these for the long term. We just installed one at the Driscoll School in Brookline, which is a boardwalk over another rain garden feature there.
Before we go to option B, any questions on the site plan in general, and also questions on the turf field? That space has changed a little bit since you guys have last seen it. We did have a meeting with both representatives from the district and also representatives from kind of the town rec side of things. This was really taking a lot of their input into account. They see this field really being used a lot, and the field at Williams right now is not in very good shape. And with the amount of use that they picture on it, they're really, even though some of them were a bit torn on whether turf was the answer, just purely from a matter of use, that's really what they were strongly recommending. So we have tried to open that space and make it as flexible as possible. We are showing a short kind of chain link fence barrier between the turf and the rest of the site. As Brian mentioned, we're showing some areas of taller netting for lacrosse balls in particular, but all uses of the field. There was interest in fixed field goals for the football field off of the main football field, so on the left and right of this image, but otherwise trying to keep everything as flexible as possible.
Seeing no questions, we can move on.
Great.
All right. We here?
So these are other precedent images. So the uses, as we've been discussing, are generally the same as we move around the building for the next scheme, but we've taken a more sort of biomorphic, curvilinear approach to the layout and materials on the site. So these are some precedent images of how that could look. Some pathways, for example, the one in the upper row in the middle just shows this notion of differing materials. So you could have concrete sidewalks, let's say, that meander through the epoxy resin aggregate, like we mentioned in the other precedent image, just to create different experiences and define spaces differently on the ground plane. Also offering permeability for some stormwater measures, and again, can be used for educational purposes. Zoom in a little bit. Lower row. I guess these are all very similar in nature, so kind of looser plantings, looser curvilinear path systems, and we can move to the next slide to kind of show you what that could look like in plan. And again, the uses and things that we noted are all very similar, it's just sort of different forms here. So let's see, George, do you want to start at the back of the school as we did the other one?
Sure.
Actually, that would be the next slide. But
Next slide.
As I mentioned earlier, this overall site plan is essentially exactly the same as the last one, only the spaces are directly around the building have changed between these options.
Are you looking to understand tonight whether we favor the curvilinear approach versus the more angular design? Is that part of the feedback you're looking for?
That'd be
Yes.
great, yeah, general thoughts on
Yeah.
that.
And if there's anything that sticks out specific between them that interests you, these are all still early sketches to develop an approach and attitude. And, certainly to find out if it feels like too much or too little. I wanted to ask before you got too far into this, Brian, if you could talk a little bit, there's been expressed concern about the soils in this area being not super viable for keeping things growing well. And I wondered, I don't know if that's just overused, but we know there's fairly sandy soils in this area as well. Is soil improvement potentially part of the process? Now, and how?
Typically is. I mean, we can test what exists out there, and then they're amended for use in planting soils or on fields. If there is concern with lawns, for example, or play fields, we would always sort of specify a particular soil blend for that is more durable, kind of high-use lawns, we might call them, which means they might have a higher sand content and drain quicker, so they don't compact easily. But in these areas, if this field becomes synthetic, we'd probably use just a typical passive lawn, but it would be not just necessarily reuse of existing loam on site, especially. So that would be tested and amended to be appropriate for all of these uses.
Questions or feedback or comments from anyone? Good. All right, should I move us along?
Sure.
Yeah. Color schemes?
So, yeah, if you could zoom out a little bit more. So now we're switching to talking about the exterior. So any other questions on the site plans? Or any strong reactions to the site plan?
Any thoughts on the curvilinear versus the more?
Option A and option B.
Right.
I see in option B, it's a lot of space to clear snow. So those pathways seem very, very wide. So I'm curious on the time it would take to make it safe in the winter.
Yeah.
On option B.
And Nick, that's an interesting question because part of that is, I think we'll need to have a discussion with you guys too, because we'll have to clear paths where we need it for egress, and then maybe that's it. Or, are there specific areas where it's easier to clear, where you guys would like, us to think about that? So I think it's an interesting question, but I think we would want to overlay a diagram on top of this of thinking of where we would clear and where we would not.
The epoxy resin aggregate surfaces that we talked about, those are, they're pretty durable for shoveling and snow blowing, and if we needed to.
That's what I was trying to research right now. Find the answer.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. It actually was just installed on City Hall Plaza in Boston, so you can imagine how much abuse that space takes. It's also on the High Line in New York City. You may be familiar with that. That's been installed. And we've done it in multifamily residential projects and other locations ourselves, but those were just notable ones that kind of paint a picture for you of its durability.
Is there an ongoing maintenance with that material outside of normal cleaning?
There is not. That's the benefit of this. The aggregate size is larger than you might typically use in, let's say, permeable asphalt and permeable concrete require maintenance because they need to be vacuumed and they're less porous. Just by nature, the voids are smaller. So they can be problematic because most folks aren't going to vacuum and maintain things. So this has larger aggregates, which means larger void spaces within it that won't get clogged, so it maintains its permeability. It does have sort of plastic reinforcing that the aggregate is placed into, and the resin holds it all in place, so it's structured for vehicles and so on. So it's a nice, unique project that is more a product that is more sustainable than kind of implementing concrete or asphalt everywhere.
Is there
And it looks nice.
different sloping in A versus B? Is one more flat than the other, or are they both relatively flat? I guess my question revolves around like rain and water, if there's gonna be runoff into different areas, or if it's just gonna stay within one area.
Yeah, so in both options, we have mounding adjacent to the fire lane. So screening that and then closing the green spaces everywhere for comfort. And then they generally slope to the middle of that space behind the school. So the low points, so you see those little rectilinear forms behind the school? In this option, those are bridges. So you can imagine those as sort of depressions. Those are the rain gardens or wetlands that, kids can walk across, run across, and interact with and learn around and so on. The other option actually put the rain garden elements closer to the fire lane. So you don't have the bridges and the pass systems and so on. It's actually the depression, right, is closer to the fire lane there. So it's sort of the seating features and things look out at it instead of kind of crossing it. There is a little bridge kind of indicated in one location there if we get there. So yes, everything will be pitched to drain, I guess, from a stormwater perspective. If we need to have catch basins like between the wings of the school because we can't pitch out, that can be accommodated and will either infiltrate within the rain gardens or our civil team will address the stormwater on site.
I was initially drawn to the curves, and I like the bridges, that idea, but I don't feel terribly strongly about it. So I'm glad Nick made the first comment, because I think I would just say whatever we can keep looking good the longest, or for the long run, because I know that like Boston City Hall has a team of people that keep it looking fresh, and we just don't have that. Or we do, but we don't have the same kind of resources. So whatever we can do, but I think they both definitely have their perks, and so I don't feel too strongly.
One feature that was interesting to talk about with the leadership team is outside of the cafeteria, you see this S-shaped curves and the amphitheater up. And I understand that what they're doing is we're kind of sloping up, so you have one level of seating and then another level of seating, and you can kind of walk up a little bit of a grade. And that was something that actually interested the principals, because it allows you a path that a staff member can walk up to look down over and see. It's not a massive amount of grade, it's very gentle, but still gives you a little bit of view over the play area. So we talked a little bit about being sure that that didn't get heavily obstructed, because it would be really helpful to be able to see across that space. So,
Yeah, supervision, sight lines, I think, are other factors that I'd want to learn more about. Particularly in the recess outside dining area there. Yeah.
we tend to also encourage the team to keep trees away from the building, because when a district isn't maintaining those trees well, over time it can add moisture to the building if they're blocking. So we'd be mindful of that and careful that that wasn't the case. That's something we see in existing schools all over the place.
Ready to move on?
Sure.
Okay.
Ways back, we showed some historic images. We spent some time walking around looking at buildings in the community. We're always looking for a way to get at this question about what kind of materials, what kind of feel the school should have. We're going to show again two options, to show you two ways of thinking that we've approached it. In one, we think of this, I spent a lot of time reading about the geology of the area and the Lake Hitchcock and why it is along that is really kind of at the bottom of Lake Hitchcock, and the soil conditions and cross sections. I got a little obsessed with that and started looking at the warmer tones of Center School and thinking about the possibility of using this kind of warm, earthy tone. Always when we're looking at designing the exterior of the school, we're trying to think about the context This is a very residential context. We want durability, so we know we're encouraged to incorporate brick. So we've been thinking about what kind of temperature approach that wants to be, and then thinking also about how that will then also influence us on the interior colors as well. So we're showing one scheme kind of loosely influenced by these warmer kind of ochre and pink colors, and they can also carry blues and green against them. So that was the initial thinking here. We also have sloping roofs, so wanted to think about how those roofs might be seen. And what that contrast might be. So go to the next screen, you see some modern materials that demonstrate some of those colors and how those can be brought in. The one on the left is a school in Cambridge, Martin Luther King. The materials here are brick, which is still the dominant tool for 50-year school building construction in Massachusetts. But there are areas where you'll bring in a rain screen material as well, often, and that will allow you to get a little bit of space from that brick and not just create a big brick block. And then we on our project have some sloping standing seam roof as well as flat membrane roof. So you're seeing a little bit of those elements. And go to the next screen. You're seeing some very quickly done renders of different parts of the building to see what those materials might look and feel like as a general temperature, kind of a gestalt feeling for it. So the top left is and this is also, I think, helpful because it gives you a sense of scale, because we've been talking about site plans and it's hard to understand, how big this might feel or not. So what you're seeing at that front is where we have that walkway from the bus drop-off. We do want good hardscape there for arrival, but that's where we did have that lawn area, and we want to be sure that there's some shade, because there's you're not going to see all the site features here at all, because we're not quite that integrated yet, but you have something that wants to be a canopy to kind of provide some protection. So this is just giving you a look at a warm brick scheme where we would probably do two to three different bricks that are very similar to each other, close to each other, just to offset and create a little texture, and a very simple horizontal or vertical approach to the windows, and then using a little bit of rain screen at the higher location. And then to the right, that's where you're asking about the massing, and we have those distinct three masses. We have the connecting points between them. We're talking about those being a lighter weight. That's where your stairs are. So that would then allow the building from a distance to read almost as three different buildings as opposed to one giant building. So that image you're seeing at the bottom shows you the back of a classroom wing. You can see how we have those gabled roofs blocking. Behind that is a low flat roof. That's where the mechanical equipment would be, so you aren't seeing it from the neighbors. And it allows us to bring daylight inside the building at the second floor level. And then to the right, you see that gray mass. If you go to the right hand image there, that's the 6th grade science classrooms, and the egress requirement door for that wing. And then just, this again is not Brian's site plan, this is just the concept of low growth plants. And then this was kind of a little quickly pulled together, but that is just the scale of the gym. And we're thinking the gym particularly would probably be block instead of brick, just to be more economical. We were talking to the structural engineer today about the relationship with that structure and the skin. And so we can kind of pop a little bit of color there and differentiate from the lighter brick. And then you'll see in the next image that the kind of one-story classrooms at the back kind of want to feel a little bit different. So in the overall, this is, again, just put together just in the last couple of days, gives you a feel for what this warm scheme might look like and feel like. We've been trying to be mindful of the height and not kind of go tall because of the residents looking towards the building and wanting to be sure that from the street, it has a pleasant, school feel, and is inviting, and you see it always from these two angles. On this side, if you see it from the west side, it really looks a little bit more gabled. On this side, less so. intentionally. So the landscape reflects some of that difference between the two sides of the building. This second scheme, just to offer some difference, here we're picking up the idea of more traditional schools. Traditionally, schools in the US from mid-century are red brick. The high school, really strong red brick, so that's the image on the right. We have other kind of clean white elements in town. So we're thinking of this as just trying to offer a cooler palette of materials, and then how that might ultimately carry into the school as well. Here you see, if you can zoom out a little bit so you can see the whole of this. This is really better as a whole image. That precedent image at the bottom of the gabled roof and brick is kind of what we were aiming for, that mix of red brick and window and panel and a slightly sloping roof. So we're just changing colors. In this version that you're seeing, we're keeping most everything the same and just changing colors. In reality, when we get into it, we'll do a lot more work on the design and the detailing. If you could keep going down. So here again, the same 4 images, but just with a different palette of colors. So have to use your imagination a little bit to imagine this as a whole. We were thinking with the panel here, you can maybe carry a slightly brighter color, and you know, you'd want to break the brick up with some relief so it's not just monolithic. And then go to the next. That shows you sort of an overall perspective.
So, sort of contrast the two.
I know, I should have put them next to each other.
So that- It's like going to the eye doctor. Better now?
It's different, yeah.
Better now.
Yeah. So this we're showing a darker roof to just contrast. What we're also really looking at right now is the amount of different materials, because that's what's going to inform the cost estimate. Strong feelings at all?
Seems very personal opinion.
Yeah, I like the warm. It seems to fit more with me in the middle of the neighborhood.
The warm's the first one?
Yeah.
I agree with you too.
The first one.
It seemed more uniform too.
This one?
Yeah.
Mhm.
In this one, again, I may not be the person asked, but the colors for the media center and the
Music wing.
and the gymnasium, yeah, back here, those seem kind of odd.
Mhm. Yeah, I think
But I-
they're meant to look a little bluer, because in the close-up images they do, that
Yeah.
image just looks warmer than the others that were, but the concept there is that those are, that's a rain screen area. It could be brick all the way, but
Yeah.
it gets to be a little bit too much brick, really. So here we've used a kind of a gray palette back there that matches the roof. And I think the accent colors we can really pick. We're going with kind of, the thinking there is that rain screen is a color through cementitious glass reinforced concrete product, so it tends to be somewhat muted colors in general. We can go with like a Lucabond type panel if we wanted bright colors, but we typically, I think our work as a firm is better if it stays kind of natural materials, natural colors, because we like to bring those inside as well.
What is your team rallying around? Or
I know I have an opinion, but I've tried not to overexert. I like the warmer one as well, I'll admit. But honestly, I like them both. Like, definitely we could work with either of them, for sure.
what's the timeline on deciding the palette?
Well, the reason why we do this first is because in the next couple of weeks, we're also going to start exploring the interior. I would say that it's helpful to the community that we have one image in front of them, not two.
Mhm.
Certainly, we could change, in DD, because we're not doing the construction documents till then. So I would say none of the details matter that much, but it's kind of nice to start having an identity for the project as people are looking at the project.
So I guess for the team, I mean, Josh, I heard you, I agree with you. I think the warmer color is nicer. I know you don't want to be decisive.
I'm just thinking I could give my
Yeah.
opinion, but it's just my opinion, and I think both are perfectly fine. I kind of lean a bit more toward the redder brick. That's just my tendency. I know that,
Mhm.
but I like them both.
Anybody on the phone?
This is Carissa. When looking at like the pictures before we got to like the renderings, I was leaning towards the cooler side, the modern pool. But then when you see that giant picture of like red brick, I feel like it's just a lot. And like we said, like in the middle of the neighborhood, I feel like the warmer, the first option, is just going to be a little bit lighter, and yeah, I feel like I'm on the warm team.
Nicole?
I would agree with what Carissa said. I think they're both lovely, but I think for the neighborhood and the space that we're looking at, the warmer tones seem to me to be a better fit.
And who else is on the phone? Julie?
Should get off.
Oh, okay. Chris?
Yeah, I mean, I think both can be done well. I think the lighter colors are probably better here, to give the neighborhood context. I know, like from my planning board, a lot of people really like the white, like the shops feel, like they really like that building in town. Like that is what everyone always says, why can't it look like the shops every time we get something to look at? So I think the town would like the lighter, the warmer, lighter.
That's a great point.
You talking about one building in particular in town?
Every planning board comments, why can't it look like the shops? Everyone can't look the same.
We can show you what it should not look like.
Right, so that's where
All you gotta do is go to the old Armadas Plaza and you can see what it should not.
Yeah, so that's interesting, because there is that kind of historic character, but then we're finding people are very, this school has a lot of modernist quality, so that interesting play between the two is kind of potentially captured here, and I think interesting to me.
Colliers have an opinion?
We do not make opinions.
How about Alan's personal opinion?
I can ask my wife, because we'll have to.
Our scope of work says no opinion architectural.
I think high school's red brick, Glenbrook's red brick, Williams red brick, Blueberry, Center, all of our schools are red brick. Do we want to make the outlier?
I'm glad we offered that option so that you have that.
We've already got the red brick on that site. Everyone's used to driving by, seeing it. I think we put something bright, changes hard sometimes for people. So you might get some pushback. Just
I don't disagree with you about the red brick. I do like the warm tone. I think it blends into the landscape, is what I like about it, because the green overpowers the light, right? So I'm paying more attention to the natural elements around it, which I think is better for the neighborhood part of it. And by the way, I have no background in any of this stuff, so I'm just speaking my own personal opinion, just like David said. This is my opinion. I think if we were to do the brick, though, that end of the school is blue. I just can't see that blue versus brick.
That's what was pushing me away from this color palette, was the gymnasium and the science. So in the bottom right, the blue is the 6th grade science classrooms, is that correct?
black and bright.
Right,
Yes.
so.
And so that color,
Yeah.
that didn't seem to fit for me, and
Couple options, so in the front, we played with a kind of a sage green that seems to work pretty well with the brick. You see that at the entry there? And the other, when we put gray with the red, did not work at all. So I don't think that felt good. It felt like a very industrial feel, whereas the gray works well with the other.
I mean, if we had a rendering with the sage on it, I think I might change my mind about what it looks like, because then the sage becomes part of nature.
Yeah, yeah.
is this the?
It makes the building look
Right.
smaller, because,
Yeah.
well, to me, I think it would make the building look smaller, because then you have the brick part, and then you kind of have the part that blends in.
Nicole's raising her hand.
Nicole?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I agree with Marty about the dark blue. That was really not matching with my mind either. And I do like the sage green more. I also think when you go back up to this one, that sort of darker red outline is also kind of throwing me a bit. And I'm wondering if that could be something that's either a warmer charcoal or brown, or else more of a creamy or sage. I think that the combo of multiple different colors of red and then the blue were kind of what was pushing me away from this one a little bit more. I do hear the thought about all of our other schools having brick. Just this brick felt different than those. It felt like it had more of that modern touch and a little bit less of the warmth that I saw in the other one.
I just one point on the other schools being brick. I just had to look up Wolfsome School because I guess that and Blueberry I don't really think of as being brick, even though they are. What I think of them as parking lot. That's this is much more. We got a big public facing wall, and so that, to me that's a little different. And same with the high school, I guess, because it's just so far back. And I know that, yeah, they are brick,
Well,
for
the
sure.
schools are not in your face like this would be.
Exactly, yeah. And I think, to me, that's kind of the difference maker. We won't, this isn't going to be far back, and we want it to, it's going to be much more prominent, I think, especially because it's 2 stories.
Do you have enough direction, or you want us to make a change?
I am always happy to take every decision back to the health and make them make a decision if we're unsure. So, you know, they're very good at being decisive. So we're happy to work on it more. I guess, again, we're gonna try and, what I am hearing that I think is really helpful to hear is that you do like the warmth either way. Like you like the natural relationship, which is helpful because we kind of try and come up with a palette on the interior that in some way we feel works with that. And you know, we aren't typically looking for bright, you know, primary colors inside, you know, because I find that a little bit didactic and overwhelming for kids. So we're trying to kind of soften it. So I did hear that supported, so that's helpful because we don't want to hold back the next phase of our thinking.
These are 2 prominent parts of the building, the entrance in the southeast corner, the main, and then the student entrance along the east drop-off road. Those really appealed to me. I'm not sure I can articulate why, just like
Can you go to the overall on the warmer one too, just to get that? Because I think that's a really important point about how it's seen when you're driving by and how it sort of fits in the neighborhood and whether or not there's any concern about that. I think the elevation you see the vertical approach to the classroom wing here, that we kind of really started getting into and how that would feel. So it's not just one wall, but actually kind of mixing in a little bit so that it kind of breaks up that monotony a little bit.
I like how it doesn't look like a school, like from the road. Like I like how it has that, the roof angles are like different. And when I'm looking at it, it looks more like living quarters.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Which I think, based upon, you know, what we've discussed so far with the neighborhood, the more we can get it to be unobtrusive, the better.
Kind of a random question, but you talked about the gabling,
Mhm.
so on those classroom wings,
Mhm.
those windows are north facing.
Yes.
Is that intentional?
Yeah.
I mean,
As much as possible, partly, no, so that north light is, you don't get that strong, harsh shadow effect. So it's a very gentle light, tends to be better.
It does also tilt our
Also-
roofs towards the south, so it's
For
more easy
solar?
for PV if
Oh,
we go
okay.
in that
Yeah.
direction in the future.
Forgot that's the other reason. Well, I heard it leaning a little bit more to the warm, but we can explore further. You know.
Ready to move on?
Yeah, I mean, unless somebody else has anything to add on it, I mean, I definitely think we had a lot of leaning towards the warm, unless there's some way to mitigate the brick with the blue, but,
Well, there's certainly we can.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, but, yeah, I think that's the leaning direction, yes.
Mhm.
so I just have one comment, not about the color palette, but
Mhm.
going back to the landscaping. I know the intent wasn't to demonstrate, well, sorry, don't scroll back to landscaping, because if
Sorry.
you look at the sort of, I'll say 3D renderings, that's a much easier way for me to
Understand it.
understand the landscaping compared to the 2D prints.
Mhm.
I mean, I can't really formulate an opinion based on the 2D plans.
Yeah, if you go to the overview again, Marty, I do think, not that, the rendering,
rendering?
I think it's helpful, if you're seeing the site plan, to kind of help you with the scale. One more, just to get the scale of the
Mhm.
entry area. We had a lot of discussion about whether or not that should be hardscape all in front of the school. And I think here maybe is why I was a little bit anxious about that idea, because I think it would.
Be a lot of hardscape.
It'd be a lot of hardscape. So it's hard to tell without the scale. We can't get all of it into that kind of 3D render. We're always building the 3D model. The landscape team is not. But once we settle in, we will start to bring the contour and build that up as well.
Small point, you know, as these renderings become, you know, more public and looked at more frequently, I'd want to make sure that we represent the buffer between the school and the neighborhood accurately. So I don't know if that's the scale. It looks bigger than it would actually be. So in
Right, some of it
fairness to the.
is distortion of
Yeah,
perspective.
I wouldn't want to misrepresent, you
Yeah.
know, what that buffer looks like.
The danger of these tools is that you
Yeah.
see a lot.
Yeah,
Great, thanks. I think that's it for this area.
Turf?
Did you want to talk about the procurement of turf or not?
As far as,
Process and vote or any of that?
I don't know if we want to get into, it's up to you. It's a matter of, when it comes time to vote, are we going to look at, similar to what they did with the pool in East Long Meadow? Would we want to do a vote for synthetic versus natural as one vote, and then the entire project obviously as a second?
Yeah, I think we need to understand, and I think we have some of that here, but I think we need to understand, and this is open for everybody, I think we need to understand the costs, the plan, the usage, the utility from Barry and the Parks Department. I know we had the meeting, I mean, Barry didn't really say a ton about field usage or.
Right.
And I know we have currently no place for field hockey in town that really works. I mean, we've got grass fields, but that doesn't work when it comes to like tournament games and big games for that constituency. So I think, yes, there is a community aspect here of if it's a multi-purpose field and we decide to go synthetic, then based upon the cost that it would, I mean, I guess the first question, there is reimbursement for grass, right? Like just to put grass down.
Wait, the reimbursement.
Yeah, your reimbursement is for outside lawn areas is only 8% of the building cost. Once you get beyond that 8%, it's gone up to about 9%. After you get beyond that, it's all on the district.
Okay.
So once you get to synthetic fields or things like that, you're probably
Does that
not.
include like asphalt?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
So,
I mean,
asphalt's gonna like be.
everything that's around the building, 5 feet,
Site work, essentially.
5 feet outside the building, 8% of the cost of the building, the site work they'll entertain.
It'll cap out.
It'll cap out.
So the logic is.
It doesn't take long to get beyond 8%.
No, I mean, asphalt's super expensive, right? Like, it's like,
It's probably the cheaper of what you're looking at out there, but yeah.
yeah, I mean, okay.
Right, so the.
That makes me feel great.
When you start thinking asphalt curbs versus, granite curbs and things like that is what I'm talking about.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
So said another way, so I can understand, we think about $100 million, 8% would be $8 million, would be our cap for outside,
That they'd participate in.
that they would participate.
Right, they will participate in with your reimbursement rate. Beyond that, the district will be picking up.
So then it would only be the X% of the.
Yes.
Yes.
Right.
So the logic being always that the MSBA is contributing to your educational priorities, and if they were to pick up a percentage of it all, then they'd be paying for everybody's football fields, and they're really, really adamant about not doing that. So they try intentionally to keep strong guardrails on there.
So I think if it comes down to that vote at that time, I guess the question is, would we have both options to put out there? I mean, we could put the turf for the constituent to decide at the town meeting as a separate bond. Well, they'd be bonded together, but yeah, the two separate votes.
I believe
But
that,
if they reject that, then we would be able to just say, okay, we're gonna make a grass field.
well, correct me if I'm wrong, but we're working with this in the Spencer High School project with a synthetic versus a natural turf field. And I believe there's engineering costs that would be, to design it two different ways, that you'd have to pay them a little bit more to design it, both ways to have that option.
I mean, the good thing is that I know for turf fields, CPC will not reimburse turf fields, but CPC is allowed to be used for site development, regardless whether you use turf or not. So, I mean, I think we would also need to talk to the CPC committee to coordinate, would they be open to hearing about using some CPC money towards site development on the turf field, which would mitigate the costs of turf.
From our standpoint, the reason why it's important to talk about it at this moment is we want to be sure we bring back through the estimating process any information you need, and that's critical. So if this is an alternate in any way, either two separate votes or an idea that you just want all the information on, we just want to be sure we're capturing both turf and a non-turf option in our cost estimate, I think, so that we have that information. And then you can make decisions about, I think, some of this after that. We should figure out what that means. I think, to Alan's point, if you're carrying forward both and you want detailed documents on both, then that certainly there's a design concern there.
I'm not sure we're talking detailed, but enough to make a financial decision.
Yeah, I mean, this is not that far off from or the cost, I guess, when I was looking into this before, it was, what would it cost to rip out a field and put in turf? But if we're starting from nothing and putting in turf, the difference is not that great. I mean, I understand it could be more than that. But there was definitely, at our town meeting vote, there was absolutely interest in having turf in town. It wasn't, maybe not overwhelming, but if there was some interest, and people would probably be much more interested in doing this than starting ripping out something in like the high school and starting new. Maybe they want both, I don't know. But I also like that this would be a lot easier to maintain, I would presume.
It's interesting, there's like a 10-year break even.
Yeah, exactly.
I never would have guessed that.
And we can use it so much more, there was a lot of pluses to it. So.
Rent it out, yeah.
Yeah, so I think 100% we need to get the information back. I think that this would be a very attractive alternative.
I agree. Anybody else on the phone?
On this, our Spencer job, and correct me if I'm wrong, Kristen, they went with natural just because there is a replacement cost that every, how many years, 15 or something? 10 to 15 years? Or is it?
Jump off.
That you are going to rip it up and replace it at a a healthy cost.
Well, that's a great piece of information to have on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So where you have a natural grass field, yes, you have a higher maintenance cost throughout the year for mowing and fertilizing or whatever you're doing on it to keep it active. But it's there for, as the length of the school.
Well, go look at Glenbrook and you can tell us if that's correct.
And then I guess like it says maintenance costs only 5 to 10, but does that include like replacing the infill?
Is Brian,
It's
Brian, are
yeah,
you
somebody's
still
on
Brian,
the
you
line.
still on?
And
I am here. Hi, guys. My name's Ryan Morrison. I'm from Pine Bond.
Hey, Brian.
I do a bunch of athletic field. Can you hear me?
yes.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, perfect. So I do a bunch of athletic fields throughout the Northeast, both natural and synthetic turf. And this was actually a slide from a presentation I did for another community, but it gave you kind of some general costs associated with everything. The maintenance cost of 5 to 10 per year is as basically covering your labor to drag the field. Some folks may choose to like stripe some of the less intensive striped athletic events. Like typically we would recommend that you have football into a field just from the standpoint of how long it takes. But the 5 to 10 is really just to cover your labor costs associated with that. When we spec a field, we do require that they leave leftover infill on site, and we find that lasts you quite a few years. Usually around year 5, communities are reaching back out to ask to have another batch of infill dropped off to the site, but it's really dependent on types of use and usage. At a middle school, I don't anticipate you guys going through a ton of infill because you're not getting that like real heavy use. Now, if a high school starts using it, or typically the places where we see infill needing to be replaced the most is like on synthetic or baseball fields, like around the batter's box or around the bases. Those are the areas where we see infill replaced a lot. But typically, around that 5-year mark, we'll see folks reach back out, get new infill dropped off at the site, and then they can distribute that as necessary.
So, question on that. This would see a lot of use. It would be heavy use. It would be 3 football teams in the fall. Then it would be lacrosse teams in the spring. And and field hockey. And you can see, like, on our grass fields here, like, where that
Heavy wear down the center?
where that net area is for lacrosse is just totally destroyed, and then like it's destroyed for every other sport the rest of the year after the lacrosse season's done. So I would say you're going to see a lot of use.
Yeah.
When you say 3 football teams, are you talking like a modified, a JV, and a varsity, or all playing at this facility, or
It's that facility is
playing
used.
from middle?
Yeah, it's used by our middle school youth teams, so 7th, 8th, and 9th grade, and there's 2 teams per grade.
Well, that's great. You guys have a lot of participation. Yeah, I mean, for that amount of use, you're going to have a real hard time keeping natural grass, regardless of the type of construction.
Okay.
We find this a lot at high schools. Because of the intensity of use during the short duration of time frame, you don't really have an opportunity to rest a natural turf athletic field. And that's really the only way to recover those goal mounts, like when or the center marks between the hashes on a football field. When they get worn out, you really want to aerate the field. You want to overseed, top dress with sand, and you want to give it a month to come back. Unfortunately, the growing seasons and your school playing seasons are going to overlap with each other. So you really can't afford to shut down a field in April and May, because come March, your teams want to get on the field, or come August, your teams want to get on the field, which means in your growing season for September, they can't give up a field. And if you only have 1 field on the site, if you're land rich and you can move people around to different areas and rest fields during different times of the year, you really have that capability of being able to let a field grow back and get those goal mouths back healthy so that the root zone can re-handle play. But if you're going to put all that use on 1 field, it's not likely that you're going to be able to keep, without an exorbitant amount of effort, you'd be more towards that $40,000 to $50,000 per year time, cost on a natural turf field to keep it
as good as a synthetic turf field is kind of the key there, because everyone can play on a natural turf field, right? Like, I don't want to say you have to spend $40 or $50 million on a field, because you guys aren't now and you're still making it work. But if it's going to look as lush and as full and play as safe as a synthetic turf field, it's going to take a lot of maintenance to do so.
Oh, now it's mud and dirt, so yeah, we get it.
When we assembled youth sports reps and our park and rec director and our PE teachers, they disagreed on many things. The one thing they all agreed on is that a grass field out there would be dirt in a very short amount of time, even with everyone's best efforts. So I think, and then you know, you're also with the turf field, you're also offsetting your maintenance costs at the other grass fields in town.
Yeah.
It's taking the strain off of those fields, so. there's
Even on
some-
top of the sports, you have the recess that's gonna
Yeah,
be
I was gonna
happening out
say.
there.
Right.
So
And gym class.
And
right?
gym class, yeah.
Yeah,
665 students.
Right.
I think, I would echo what Josh said. I think we absolutely need the information on the costs associated with a turf field, and then let the residents make an informed decision one way or another.
Ryan, so you have to, bring in new fill every once in a while, but how about the full replacement of the synthetic turf? How often does that need to happen?
So they're fully guaranteed to operate the way they're supposed to operate when they're installed for the term of 8 years. Our typical lifespan of the field, now we're talking about the carpet and infill only, is between 12 and 15 years. The carpet breaks down mostly because of solar exposure. It does not, while cleats can tear off fibers of it, the carpet doesn't really break down until it sees too much solar exposure that it turns to like almost a plastic bottle that you picture at a beach. If it's all friable and starts falling apart, you'll start seeing the fibers start breaking way easier, and then it's time to replace the field. Underneath that field, so that's just the carpet, underneath that field is an impact attenuation pad. That impact attenuation pad is, originally we used to do impact attenuation via infill. What we found is over the time fields were compacting, the sand and rubber was compacting, and we weren't getting the same impact attenuation numbers from the installation of the field to the end of the life of the field, and some of the fields were becoming unsafe and have to have an infill pulled from them. So we started using a pad underneath synthetic turf fields. That's about 5 or 6 years ago. And what we're finding now is we get much steadier impact attenuation numbers, and we just use less infill to offset it. That being said, the pads today typically have a lifespan, a warranted lifespan of 25 years, which means the pad stays through 2 carpet replacements. And so, you should budget for a replacement at 12 years and hope you get to 15 years is kind of what I always tell everybody. But your pad replacement, I could send you guys some costs, but it's probably somewhere around the $4 to $5 square foot range to replace your carpet. Currently, today's numbers, obviously there'll be some inflation on that down the road.
Yeah, I know like East Long Meadow built theirs in 2011, and it's showing its age right about now, so I mean, it's about 14 or 15 years old, so it's matching right up. And that field gets a lot of...
As far as the numbers you see on this screen, just as kind of a quick note, those numbers are for like a typical size synthetic turf field that you'd see a single football field that are not applicable. Looking at the schematic today that I saw for your proposed field with all of its intended uses, you'd have more cost. You just have more square footage to deal with there. But we could, obviously you're going to go get costs and they'll help you get that. And if there's anything else we can provide, we'll do that.
I think that this idea of breaking it out as a separate vote needs a lot more discussion with the MSBA. At the end of this schematic design phase, we will be asked to provide the construction cost of the project that will then go into that whole grant negotiation or finalization, and then they're approving that. With East Long Meadow, a pool building was a very, very different thing than a $1 to $2 million turf field, and they wanted to, we had to pretend it wasn't there for the entire process because it had to be so divorced. They viewed it as a community project separate from, but they couldn't kind of get rid of it. So I think this is at a different scale, and I don't know how that's going to go over with the
Yeah, we'll have to have a
MSBA.
conversation.
I think we
We'll
have
make that phone
to
call.
have an agreement prior to getting to the vote. So
Right.
at this point, we come in with the information out of here, and if it's
Yeah.
not a huge delta, it could be a lot more complex to split it out than we're imagining right now.
Yeah, and I think that tonight, like, Ryan bringing his information like he just did, I think, for me, like, I'm ready to just say go turf with the plan. Like, he gave what I think I needed to hear. I'm not saying that the rest of the committee members needed that same information, but the way he talked about, you know, field rotation and you need 2 months off and we're never gonna get 2 months off and we're gonna go from, you know, X number of people to this and it's gonna get the amount of usage that it is, and, you know, for all those reasons, it just, you know, that it made sense to me. But I mean, I still think we need the costs side by side. If you tell us, hey, grass is like this and this is, if like for 300 grand more, you can get turf, then, you know, or whatever it is.
You're talking first cost of going in, a grass field versus a turf field?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just high level, yeah.
Yeah, everything that goes into this building is going to require maintenance. I mean, that the, you know, the town's going to have to pay for.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's something that Nick will want to know as far as, does he need, you know, you have to cut the grass once a week now, or even more, and you have to stripe it and do all that. But with turf, is it, how often do you have to do anything to turf? You know, is it once a month you have to do anything, or rake it, or I don't know the process for it.
And then, I mean, I guess these costs probably don't cover like the snow blower attachment or the brushes and all, I don't know, like it's.
Yeah, equipment will be different. You'll have to, you know, be stocked with the right equipment and all
Yeah.
that type of stuff.
And where do we store it?
Yep.
Nick's thinking all that already.
Typically, in our spec, we will include a turf groomer.
Okay.
So we wouldn't include the side-by-side unit to pull it, or whatever you may pull it, the gator, or whatever the staff may have. But we would include a turf groomer on a site that doesn't already have turf. As far as like what is your monthly or weekly maintenance strategy, you're probably, again, depending on the use and how the infill is migrating on the field, you may groom it as much as once a week. That's just pulling something over the top of it. Other communities drag them once a month. Another thing that can be a nuisance is leaf falling on the field. You want to get that organic material off the field so it doesn't work its way down into the infill. So you want to leaf blow it in the fall. As far as snow removal for snow blowers or anything like that, most synthetic turf providers will say that you can snow plow the field. We recommend against it if you don't have to. It runs a little bit warmer than everything to begin with. We've had some success with schools just putting trash cans out in the field so that after a snowstorm they can remove the trash can. There'll be some dark spots on the field and it will melt using solar exposure all on its own. And that kind of helps save the longevity of the synthetic turf fibers while getting it on the field early in March.
We'll get the little wolves from this one.
We can do that.
Cool.
Before we leave the field issue, I want to, we did include in our PSR numbers some money for irrigation, and some of the things that are on the left were already there. And given the conversation about grass and concerns about the rest of the area and how grass dies here, or is heavily used, I want to just ask whether we should get information about irrigation around the building at all. If, you know, so package A for the field would include irrigation, as we already had assumed. Package B would be.
But if we don't,
synthetic
if we have a
turf.
turf field, well, I don't know, do turf fields need to be sprayed down?
A while back, say 10, 12 years ago, we were adding like water cannons, is what they were calling them, along synthetic turf fields.
Mm-hmm.
And that was in an effort to fight the conversation about how hot synthetic turf fields could be during the summer.
Right.
What we found for the most part in the Northeast is that the water cannons on the really hot days didn't make the field more bearable. It just made it kind of humid and hot at the same time. And in the Northeast, we don't get too many complaints about it being warmer because of when high schools are trying to play.
Right.
High schools are trying to play, April, May, June, September, October, November, and so the little bit warmer atmosphere that we get at high schools is typically wanted. Yes, there's a couple of months, especially at busy high schools or high schools that have summer programs, where it can get hot in, June, July, and August. And so, especially at the end of June and July. And so, we ask schools to monitor it, but we don't recommend spraying the fields down anymore with water. It just kind of makes it kind of nasty out there.
So I was thinking, in package 2, turf, no irrigation. But just as an information gathering, is there interest in putting irrigation elsewhere on the site to maintain any other planting areas that you've been concerned about? Or is irrigation problematic if you don't need it?
Well, if you water it, then you have to cut it.
And now we know why the fields are dead.
It's another maintenance layer. So I think irrigation would just be another thing for us to take care of that we don't have the capability to take care of.
I mean, I'd be totally in line with you, like using drought-tolerant plants or whatever else, or whatever materials that blend into the nature.
So the soil improvements, drought-tolerant seedings.
How about with lead points and things like that? I mean, as far as irrigation, that's a big.
We would have had to sacrifice.
You would
but-
sacrifice some points if you put in irrigation on leads.
But I think if you had a strong desire, I just wanted to bring it up, but I'm happy to not do it. I just wanted to check if that was.
No strong desire for me.
Okay. Great.
And not putting in irrigation saves money for the turf field.
Exactly. Makes the turf field a little. So you want to talk about the sustainability issues?
Sure. Yeah. Brian, thank you.
That was awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan.
Real quick, just wanted to report to the committee, we did have a meeting with Eversource on these Path 1 incentive rates. They have a fantastic presentation. We have always been targeting this, but it was just good to sit down with them. We're now kind of in line, we're on their radar, and understand a little bit more of the nuance of it. So we were there with our design team, our mechanical engineers, and our electrical engineers in particular, which was important. So we are targeting the tier 1 for what they call a net zero level school, and how they determine if you are quote unquote a potential net zero project is by this energy use intensity score, this EUI range. So you'll start hearing that more as these energy efficiency measures catch on with the state as well. But it's basically just calculating your energy use per square foot of your building. And they want it very much to be just the energy use of the building, not of the site. So for instance, we learned that we will have to have a metering system, not that Eversource can read, but that the district can determine. We will have some EV parking spots on the site, and so we'll want to make sure that that energy use is not attributed to the building. Same thing for the site lights at the football field, that energy use is not attributed to the building, because that would skew your numbers and make
So
you think that you had
EV parking spots required as part of the project?
Required not according to LEED, but according to the stretch code of municipal law.
And how many?
I think it's 10% of your total.
And
Plus
right-
you have to have infrastructure
for future.
I mean, that's fine by me,
Something
but
like that.
Josh, have you guys ever decided the rates on that thing so we can open up the?
Don't even get me started.
Well, I know that currently every single charger in town has a heavy chain around it. So.
Because our service room went out of business.
Oh, is that what it
Yeah.
is? Oh, okay.
It's an absolute disaster.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it has nothing to do, we have rates in place if we go up.
They did ask the town about this, and there's no, the
There's
answer
no
was, we
policy
don't want,
yet?
we don't,
Okay.
Our planning director is leaving, it's,
Yeah.
it's a tough
I'm not
time.
sure how we're gonna solve that issue.
Yeah, so there is some discussion
Sorry
about
for bringing
finding.
this up.
It's the wild west. I mean, having.
So we had NLX or something, and they went out of business, and we were trying to find someone else to just take it over for us and use their rates. I don't know, but we do have That's for charging other people. We have chargers at like DPW that we use. So, and I don't know what that rate is, but there's some way to do it.
Okay.
Um,
I don't care if it's cheap, as long as they're there.
Right, and when I say 10%, then you cut it in, so if you needed 10 spots, that would be 5 chargers, just to be clear.
Okay, cool, thanks.
Yeah. So we are targeting an EUI of 25 or less. It does mean our building envelope has to be super efficient, but it also has a lot to do with the mechanical equipment. So then when you get a construction incentive of $2 per square foot from MassSave, from Eversource. There's an additional incentive for the type of mechanical system that you are proposing. We are looking at ground source heat pumps with a geothermal, which comes with the highest incentive of $4,500 per ton. So the folks at Eversource were thrilled to hear that we were already considering that as part of the project.
And how many tons would this be?
Forget to be
Good.
Yeah, I don't
I'll
want
let
to
you
put
know
out
the
that
next meeting.
Okay.
I'm not sure, they're in the middle of energy modeling it, so I don't know if we know exactly.
What's roundabout for a building this size?
Well, I'll tell you that doing the math on this is several $1 million worth of incentive,
Okay.
so. Is that
Several $1 million
enough?
rings a bell, thank you.
There is an additional incentive for the district supplying Eversource with how the how the building is performing after we're done. So the post occupancy is another $1.50 per square foot. So that does involve sharing the energy requirements after the project's over. But seems like it's certainly worth that small amount of paperwork that.
Have you worked
that
with
will
other
be
clients who
required.
have done that?
No.
Okay.
This
Right.
is
Good, I just wanted Nick to understand
New.
what he's signing up for to get the additional cash.
Yeah.
Nick, this meeting's all about you, Nick.
But the building's so heavily metered, you
Yeah.
know, that data's not too hard to get.
Okay, that's.
right. So this is just sharing it. Now the so that's the process for the reimbursement. In terms of the process for going through the this whole starting with Eversource, they want an energy model at the end of schematic design, which is interesting because the MSBA does not require an energy model at that point. But we're working with our mechanical engineers. They are working on that right now. So we'll share that data with Eversource as we submit the information to the MSBA. They have an outside consultant review that information and provide feedback. That outside consultant is supposedly giving a quote to do that to Eversource right now, and that gets split 50-50 between the district, town, and Eversource picking up half of those costs. Then we submit the energy model again halfway through design development and at the end of design development, and that's making sure that we are still on target with that 25 or less energy use intensity. So it's a very prescribed process. We were there with the person who is going to do the energy model review for Eversource, an outside consultant, private firm in Massachusetts. The woman was fantastic, also seemed very on top of it. And so just having her be able to talk to our mechanical engineer this early in the process was very helpful. So it all looks like it's moving forward. We have some paperwork to sign with the town. But this process is underway.
Awesome.
And the incentives are, the incentives payable at the end of 1 year of occupancy, so those come from Eversource?
Right.
The incentives payable at the end of construction, are those federal incentives?
No, this is all through
This is
the
all
MassSave
Eversource
program.
as well, okay.
So this is separate from the IRA.
This is separate from any federal incentives that we might get?
Exactly.
And you said this is new, so there's no history of how long it actually does take to pay it back?
Pay it back.
So I mean, payable, to me, that's a very loose word, where it could take 4 months, it could take a year. it could-
Oh,
so-
in terms of when they pay out?
Yeah.
That's a good question.
Good question.
Tom has it tonight, is Ian.
And is it payable or credited?
Well, that's what I'm wondering too.
They did have a very long list of projects in their presentation that have gone through this process. The vast majority of them are schools because they're just, but it's open for all construction.
The slide says elementary, I'm assuming that's just a typo. This would apply to our middle school.
The same incentives,
Okay.
yeah. Those are the same
Yeah.
that we were looking at
Yeah.
down the road for the high school as well.
Yeah.
Cool. Brings us to the end of the,
Well, it said something about schedule updates too. Do you guys?
On our side, just to mention that, a couple other meetings to let you know about, we did have our lead charrette kickoff, which was with all of our consultants and the district, to look at our lead points and goals and how we're doing on that and align them with the district priorities. And we're on tap for silver still. We have 46 strong yeses, 48 maybes, and we only need 50 total. And there's some pilot points that we're also looking at that I'll talk to the district about,
Pleasure.
that are basically just kind of checklist process of considering resiliency issues, but not actually changing anything in the design. So that's going well. We did talk about meeting, some upcoming meetings that we're in the middle of scheduling. One is another security review with the town prior to the end of this phase, so that's in the middle of being scheduled right now. And the other is a just general town look at the site plan and utilities and the geothermal and the phasing, and kind of getting everybody on board thinking about those issues in case there's any concerns or mitigation issues that we need to know about or think about prior to the cost estimating. So we're just trying to wrap everything up for the estimate process.
Anybody else on the phone? Anything? Seeing none, I'd entertain.
Oh, hey, sorry.
No worries. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
make a motion to
So
adjourn.
moved.
Yeah, that was good.
Moved, I have a second.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, call for a vote. Marty?
Yes.
Josh has left. Chris?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Carissa?
Yes.
And Nicole?
Yes.
Armin, yes. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Great meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Later, everyone.